It happened in the quietest way. The kind of moment that shouldn't break a person, but somehow leaves them shattered. I had been looking forward to the wedding for months, not because I craved the spotlight, but because it was my daughter's big day. I thought I would be there to watch her walk down the aisle, to hold her bouquet while she straightened her veil, to whisper a blessing before she became someone's wife. But instead, I opened my email one ordinary afternoon and found the words that cut deeper than anything I could have imagined. We've decided to keep the ceremony small. Only close friends will attend. I hope you understand. The words were polite enough, but I understood exactly what they meant. I wasn't considered family anymore. My daughter, the child I had carried and raised and sacrificed so much for, had placed me outside the circle of her most important moment. I sat there at my kitchen table, staring at the screen, and the sound of the refrigerator humming was the only thing reminding me that the world hadn't stopped. I felt the sting in my chest, a quiet heartbreak that didn't explode into tears. At first, it just sank into me like a stone, heavy and cold. My hands trembled as I thought about every late night I had spent working 2 jobs to keep food on the table. Every holiday where I had gone without so she could have more. Every little dream I had quietly set aside because her dreams always came first. And yet, in this moment, all of that seemed invisible. I was invisible. I replayed her words in my head. Softer each time, but sharper too. Only close friends will attend. Was I not close? Was I not even worth the chair in the back row? My mind raced with memories of her childhood, moments when she had clung to me like I was her entire world. To think that years later, I would be pushed aside as if those memories had no value, it left me numb. That's when I knew I wasn't just forgotten, I was being erased. When I look back at my life, it feels like a long string of sacrifices woven together by love. I wasn't born into wealth or comfort, but I worked hard. And when my daughter came into this world, she became my reason for everything. I remember rocking her to sleep in a small apartment, counting pennies to make sure there was milk in the fridge, telling myself that no matter how tired or hungry I was, she would never go without. I spent most of my younger years chasing stability, not for myself, but for her. I worked extra shifts, skipped vacations, and let my own dreams of finishing school fade quietly into the background. I told myself it was temporary, that once she was grown, I'd find time again for the things I had set aside. But motherhood has a way of making those temporary sacrifices permanent. Still, I never regretted it. I was proud of her, proud of the woman she was becoming. I kept every school photo, every award, every little note she left me on the kitchen counter. Those small things were treasures, reminders that the late nights and empty wallets had been worth it. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. The little girl who once clung to my hand at the bus stop grew into a woman who seemed to find my presence more of an inconvenience than a comfort. At first, I brushed it off as normal children grow up. They become independent. They pull away. But the signs were there if I had cared to look closer. I remember times when she'd roll her eyes if I told a story at family dinners, or when she'd change the subject the moment I tried to offer advice. There were holidays where I'd notice fewer and fewer photos of me around her home, as if I'd been edited out of the story. And when her partner came into the picture, I felt the shift deepen. He was charming to others. But with me, there was always a subtle distance, a polite coldness that left me questioning my place. I told myself not to overthink it, that families go through seasons, But in my heart, I felt it, the slow fading of my role, the quiet rewriting of where I fit. I just didn't want to admit it yet. And so, when the true cruelty finally showed itself, I can't say it came without warning. It was simply the moment when all those small dismissals and quiet exclusions hardened into something undeniable. The signs I once tried to excuse finally came crashing into the open. It was at a dinner in their home, a long, polished table surrounded by their friends and colleagues. I had dressed carefully that night, smoothing out my simple navy dress, bringing along a pie I baked that morning. I wanted to contribute, to show I still had something of value to add to their world. The room glowed with the soft shimmer of crystal glasses and perfectly plated appetizers. I sat quietly near the end of the table, listening more than speaking, smiling when others laughed, though the jokes barely reached me. My pie sat untouched at the far end, its golden crust looking out of place among the catered dishes. I reminded myself it didn't matter. I was here to be with family. That should have been enough. But then it came. A single comment, wrapped in a laugh, tossed out as if it were nothing. My daughter leaned forward and said she sometimes felt like I was useless at these dinners. But it was sweet that I tried. The words hung heavier than the chandelier above us. For a moment, forks stilled. A few guests chuckled awkwardly, unsure whether to laugh or look away. And my son-in-law, seated proudly beside her, didn't even glance my way. My cheeks burned as though I'd been slapped. But I forced myself to sit straighter, my hands twisting the napkin under the table to keep from trembling. I told myself not to react, not to give her the satisfaction. Yet inside, I felt myself shrinking, folding in on the humiliation. As the evening went on, I heard little of the conversation. I stared at the roses in the centerpiece until they blurred. When dessert was served, no one touched the pie I had made. They reached instead for glossy cakes from the bakery downtown. I sat there pretending I was full, my chest tight, my heart thudding against my ribs as if to remind me I was still alive, still here, even if no one else saw me. By the time the night ended, coats were gathered, laughter trailed out the door, and I stood like a piece of furniture in the entryway. My son kissed my cheek distractedly, already scrolling through his phone. My daughter gave me a smile that didn't touch her eyes, and I stepped into the cold night knowing, with a heaviness I couldn't shake, that I was no longer family, I was a guest, and perhaps even an unwelcome one. That was the night the cruelty became undeniable. The sacrifices, the love, the years I poured into them, all of it dismissed in a single evening. That's when I realized this wasn't just about being overlooked. It was about being discarded. The night after that dinner, I sat alone at my kitchen table long after the clock struck 23:00. The house was silent except for the steady hum of the refrigerator, the same sound that had filled the room the day I read that email. My hands rested on the worn wooden surface, tracing the scratches and dents that told stories of birthday candles blown out, late-night homework sessions, and quiet meals for two after my husband passed. I felt the weight of humiliation pressing on my chest, heavy and unrelenting. For hours, I replayed the look on my daughter's face, the laughter of her friends, the untouched pie at the end of the table. At first, all I could feel was despair. I had given my best years, my energy, my love, and this was what I had been reduced to. An afterthought, a prop in someone else's show. But as the night stretched into early morning, something inside me began to stir. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was more like a quiet realization. A voice I had ignored for too long, reminding me that I still had value. That I wasn't finished. That I was not as powerless as they believed me to be. I looked at the framed photographs on the shelf. Each one a testament to the life I had built. My late husband's smile, my daughter's kindergarten graduation, the house we had worked so hard to pay off. Those pictures were proof that my existence had weight, that my sacrifices had meaning, even if they were now being dismissed. As dawn crept in through the blinds, I remembered something my husband used to say. He was meticulous about paperwork, always making sure the house, the accounts, the legal documents were in order. He had told me more than once that he wanted me to feel secure, no matter what happened. Back then, I brushed it off, thinking it was just his way of being overly cautious. But now, those memories felt like seeds planted for a moment I hadn't yet understood. A calm washed over me as the pieces began to align. I realized that the life I had built wasn't so easily erased. There were protections in place, safeguards my daughter and her husband might not even know about. For the first time in weeks, I sat back and breathed deeply, no longer drowning in despair, but rising into something steadier. I wasn't sure yet what I would find, but I knew one thing for certain. It was time to stop grieving what I had lost and start uncovering what was truly mine. When I finally gathered the courage to meet with the attorney who had handled my husband's affairs, I walked into his office with my heart pounding. Part of me feared I would confirm my daughter's claim that I had nothing, that I had been left at the mercy of her goodwill. I sat across from the lawyer, my palms damp against the leather armrest, bracing for another blow I wasn't sure I could survive. But what I heard was nothing like what I expected. He pulled out a folder, worn but carefully kept, and slid it across the desk. Inside was my husband's updated will. The words blurred for a moment as tears filled my eyes, but as I focused, the truth came into sharp relief. The house, the very home I had been told was no longer mine, had been left solely to me. Not only that, but 70% of the financial assets, accounts, and investments were placed in my name. I felt my breath catch. 70%. My husband had secured my future, ensuring I would never be left destitute. And then came the part that nearly made me laugh out loud through the tears. My daughter's portion was conditional. She had been left a smaller share, locked behind a trust. With one explicit requirement, she had to treat me with dignity and respect in order to receive it. I sat there stunned, the irony washing over me like a tide. The very thing she had failed at so spectacularly, the kindness she had withheld, the cruelty she had chosen, was the key to everything she wanted. And now, because of her arrogance, she had lost it all. A wave of emotions surged through me. First shock, then relief so powerful it felt like oxygen flooding my lungs after being held underwater. And finally, satisfaction. Quiet, undeniable satisfaction. For weeks, I had been made to feel powerless, discarded, erased. But here was proof that I wasn't the fool they thought I was. And neither was the man I had loved for so many years. He had seen this possibility coming. He had prepared for it. He had protected me in a way that only now I fully understood. As I left the office, clutching those papers, I felt taller, steadier. The humiliation of that dinner, the sting of that email, they no longer defined me. What defined me now was the knowledge that I was holding all the cards. And with that realization came a new thought. It was time to stop absorbing the blows and start delivering my own. The morning after I left the attorney's office, I woke before the sun and made coffee the way I always do, slow, careful. 2 beats to breathe while the kettle sang. At 7:40 a.m., I opened the folder again. The will, the trust, the clause that named dignity, the price of admission. My hands didn't shake this time. I felt something steadier take its place, like a keel finding the water. By 8:15 a.m., I had a list. Not a list of arguments or speeches, a list of actions. I called my attorney first and asked for everything to move at once. He understood the urgency without me raising my voice. Notices would go to the trustee. The clause would be invoked. Distributions to my daughter would halt. Custodians of accounts would be informed that I was alive, competent, and in possession of the original will. At 9:12 a.m., the first bank answered. I verified passphrases my husband and I had chosen years ago. Silly phrases that now felt like anchors. I authorized new cards in my name only. I removed every access my daughter had quietly granted herself under the polite umbrella of helping. I asked that any transactions initiated from unfamiliar devices trigger alerts. I gave them my number. A manager said she admired my composure. I told her composure is just grief with a job to do. By 10:30 a.m., the utility companies had confirmation of ownership. The house remained exactly what the will said it was mine. Automatic transfers my daughter had set up to her accounts were canceled. The gardener, the housekeeper, the maintenance contracts were reissued under my signature. Not a single service was cut. Only the hands that held the levers changed. At 11:45 a.m., the trustee's office confirmed receipt of the clause letter. Respect and dignity were not metaphors in our paperwork. They were keys. I didn't feel triumphant so much as aligned. Like a door had always been there, and I had finally found the handle. Just after lunch, the messages started. A pending transfer failed. A card declined at a boutique I'd never stepped foot in. A contractor emailed to say he'd been told to wait on a deposit for a renovation I had never approved. I sat at the kitchen table with my ledger and watched the alerts arrive like distant thunder. It wasn't pleasure. It was proof. For weeks I had been told I was powerless, and yet with a few measured calls, the story bent back to the truth. In the afternoon, I visited the house. My house, as if seeing it for the first time. I walked the perimeter, checked windows, stood in the doorway of the bedroom I hadn't slept in since the funeral. I left a quiet note for myself on the dresser paint chips for the walls, a list of bulbs to plant in spring, a reminder to have the piano tuned, practical, ordinary things, a life resumed. The phone rang just before 16:04 p.m. My daughter's name lit the screen. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times, then answered. I won't repeat her words because they were the same notes I have heard for years, only played faster confusion braided with indignation, a touch of wounded pride. The claim that I had misunderstood. The insistence that she had been carrying the weight of everything and deserved consideration. I listened until there was space for my breath. Then I spoke from a place I had never allowed myself to stand. I told her the facts without decoration, the will, the trust, the clause, the letters already sent, the accounts already secured, the services already in my name. I told her the pie at the dinner had not been the humiliation. The humiliation had been teaching her to expect there would never be consequences for cruelty. I told her there would be no scene, no screaming match, no spectacle for friends to dissect. Only boundaries, only law, only truth. When she tried to pivot to suggest that this could be handled quietly, if I would simply reconsider, I felt the old habit in me want to soften. That habit had raised her, fed her, protected her. That habit had also erased me. I let it go. And then, I let the sentence I had been carrying all day step out into the light. For 40 years I was reasonable. That ends today. I didn't say it to wound. I said it to mark a line both of us could finally see. On the other end of the call, there was a silence I had not heard from her since she was small, the silence of realizing the rules had changed. She asked what I wanted. I told her I wanted the same thing I have always wanted: respect, and the right to live in my own life without being managed out of it. When the call ended, I called my attorney again. We arranged for a formal notice of trespass to be prepared, not because I planned to use it, but because I refused to be surprised in my own doorway. We scheduled a meeting with the trustee for the next morning at 09:09 a.m. We added my financial advisor to the call list for asset reviews, beneficiary confirmations, and a charitable arm I had once only daydreamed about when money felt like a narrow bridge instead of open road. As dusk pulled itself across the windows, I made tea and stood by the sink. My phone buzzed with a text I didn't open, followed by another from a number I recognized as my son-in-law's. I could imagine the conversation happening in their kitchen, the scramble for a story that would make them the victims again. The plan to arrive with apologies polished and conditions tucked underneath. People who rely on entitlement rarely accept a closed door without trying the window. That's how these things go. When money is no longer a lever, manipulation looks for a louder stage. I could feel it gathering even before it arrived, the desperate final attempt. The threat dressed as concern. The secret they thought would scare me back into silence. I rinsed my cup, turned off the light, and wrote one more line on my list for the morning. Be ready for the story they bring next. I thought the storm had passed when I froze the accounts and reclaimed my home. But people like my daughter don't give up easily. They pivot. They scheme. They crawl back with one more trick up their sleeve. A few days later, she showed up on my porch looking like a shadow of the woman who once barked orders at me. Her mascara was smudged, her voice soft, almost childlike. She begged me to forgive her. She said she hadn't meant it, that grief had made her cruel, that she just wanted her mother back. For a moment, I almost wavered. After all, she was still my daughter. But then I remembered the night she told me to find somewhere else to die, and the steel inside me hardened. What she didn't know was that the lawyer had given me more than just the will. He had also handed me a recording my husband had made his final safeguard. In that video, Robert spoke directly to her, outlining exactly what would happen if she disrespected me. He anticipated her greed, her entitlement, her cruelty, and he made sure her inheritance would collapse the moment she revealed who she truly was. So, as she sat across from me, tears running down her cheeks, I played the recording. Her father's voice filled the room, calm, firm, unshakable. He told her that if she failed to honor me, if she dared to push me aside, she would forfeit everything. The color drained from her face as the truth settled in. She wasn't going to talk her way out of this. She wasn't going to manipulate me back into her control. For once, she was trapped by her own actions. I watched her crumble, and in that moment, I didn't feel pity. I felt closure. Because justice doesn't always come in the form of police or courts. It comes when the truth exposes someone so completely that they can no longer hide behind their lies. That was the final twist. She hadn't just lost her inheritance. She had lost the one illusion she had always clung to, that she could outsmart everyone, even her own parents. As I turned off the recording, I looked at her one last time and thought, this is what poetic justice feels like.